Good evening, executive members, councillors, officers and members of the public, and welcome to this Waverley meeting of the executive. May I remind you all that this is a meeting that is being held in public. It is not a public meeting. If we can move to the first item of the agenda, which are the minutes of the last meeting, which was held on the 11th of July, and also the minutes of the special meeting held on the 18th of July and the 22nd of August, which have been laid on the table for half an hour. Are those agreed? Agreed. Thank you, colleagues. I will sign those minutes at the end of the meeting. Mr. Taylor, apologies for absence. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. We've received apologies from Councillor King.
Thank you. Moving to declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest?
None received in advance, Leader.
Thank you. We have received in advance and in accordance with Procedural Rule 10 a number of questions from members of the public, and those are questions that are now laid and have been tabled, and those questions come from Roger Blishen of the Surrey Coalition of Disabled People, from Mrs. Angie Welsh, and from Amanda Clegg. As I say, those have been tabled, and the responses have also been or will be given to those people. Thank you. So we move to the next item, which is item 5, blue badge parking charges and the consultation feedback. The report, colleagues, is pages 7 to 34. Councillor Edwards, would you like to take that item? Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. First of all, can I start by thanking all those individuals and groups that contributed to our consultation. In particular, I'd like to thank the Surrey Coalition and the Disability Network South West Surrey, who also took the time to meet us. We have certainly benefited from the assistance and feedback we received, and this has been reflected in the content and recommendations contained in this report. The proposals set out in this report are designed to provide free parking for Waverley residents who have a blue badge and have been assessed as being on low income or have significant mobility issues, and would therefore be entitled to a free permit. This includes residents in receipt of income-related benefits, either the lower or higher rate of attendance allowance, or the higher rate of personal independence payment, or the higher rate of disability living allowance. All other blue badge holders would pay the standard parking charge for that car park. The report also recognises that even with the provision of larger parking bays located close to the exits, some disabled people can take longer to get from their cars to wherever they are going and back. Therefore, the report also recommends that all Waverley residents with a blue badge who are not entitled to a free permit will receive their second hour of parking for free. The report also recommends undertaking works at Waverley car parks to make the pay and display machines more accessible by installing drop curbs or ramps up to the machines nearest the disabled bays. To improve access to the popular pay-by-phone service, the report recommends additional signage close to the disabled bays with details of how to use this service. Finally, We will continue to explore new payment options as these become available in the industry to facilitate greater choice and further improvements to accessibility. Thank you.
Councillor Edwards, thank you very much for that clear summary of the report. I think it's very important to recognise and as you have said, to thank the various parties who've helped and really informed the additional consultation and the work that has been done on this over the last few months to really, as I say, try and address as many of the matters that have been raised as possible. And obviously, to your point, that is something that will be ongoing in terms of other payment options as they become available as well. I think it's really important that we recognise that the Council's carried out its equality impact assessment and has, as I say, worked hard to address as many of the matters that have been raised as possible. And in line with that, we have 4 recommendations on the agenda this evening. Recommendations 1 to 3, colleagues, remain as shown on the agenda. Recommendation 4 is to be amended, and I'll read the wording for that. Mrs. McQuillan's also going to put that onto the screen above me, but just for clarity, I'll read that. So recommendation 4 now reads, approves criteria for in addition to the higher rate of personal independence payment and the higher rate of disability living allowance and any income-related benefit. So, colleagues, we have 4 recommendations. Are those agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. If we move to our next item, which is item 6, which is the budget management report, that can be found on pages 35 to 40. Councillor Hall, could I ask you to take that item? Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. I've not actually got a huge amount to say on this item. The General Fund and the HRA are broadly in line of where the budgets are supposed to be. And with the Investment Board, we're currently looking at some more investments which will bring new revenue to us. I must, however, raise attention to the risks which were outlined in the July meeting. These are still very clear and very present for Waverley's finances. The negative grant, the new homes bonus, the business rates retention, and also the potential for the removal of money for the recycling scheme all pose risks to our finances. This year's budget setting will be very challenging, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. I think you've summed that up extremely well. We have a number of challenges ahead, and I know that work is due to start with a number of the committees within the council, and I know that officers have already started working with you on the forthcoming budget, and I and other colleagues will also continue to work at both ministerial level and with our colleagues on Surrey Leaders to do all that we can to at least gain some certainty or some clarity on some of these areas, because one of the difficulties we have at the moment with the forthcoming budget is this whole uncertainty, and that really isn't helpful either. So, colleagues, there are recommendations across pages 3 and 4. In all there are 6 recommendations. Are those agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Moving to item 7, which again is Councillor Hall, and this time it's the Treasury Management activity to date, 2017-18 and 2016-17 performance. And that is on the report, pages 41 to 48. Councillor Hall?
Thank you, Leader. This report is really just for the executive to note. We are slightly above our target in terms of revenue by about 10 basis points, which is 0.1%. The main investment in this area is purely in sort of money market instruments, generally about sort of 90% of which are less than a year in duration, so they're quite short investments, with a total of about sort of 63 million on deposit at any time. The performance is satisfactory and ahead of target, so it's for the executive to note.
Thank you. Colleagues, any comments on that item? Right, we have recommendations on that item to note. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. And moving to item 8, which is the funding to the voluntary sector organisations and the service level agreements 2018-19 to 2020-21. And that's a report you'll find pages 49 to 56 of your agenda. Councillor Bolton, I believe you'd like to take that item.
Thank you, Leader. The Council funds a number of voluntary organisations that provide high priority service for the benefit of residents. We are hugely supportive of the voluntary organisations in our borough, both their staff and volunteers, and all the good work that they do, often supporting some of our most vulnerable residents. The purpose of this report is to seek the Executive's approval to continue to support funding for 12 nominated voluntary sector organisations through its 3-year service level agreements, the SLAs. Also to approve the proposed thorough and transparent process to review the existing SLAs so that we are ready for the nominated organisations to sign new SLAs for the next 3 years, starting in April 2018. Despite significant financial challenges, the Council is proud that it has maintained its overall funding to the voluntary sector for the past 5 years and will look to protect overall funding if at all possible as part of this review. Thank you.
Councillor Bolton, thank you. Colleagues, anyone wish to comment on that item? I think in summary, Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Leader. I'd just like to note that 3 of the 12 items are direct support to Farnham activities. So although we have 4 main towns in the borough and a large number of villages, there's 3 activities which are really totally to support Farnham.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. I think having been myself a part of this process for a number of years now and held this portfolio several years ago, shortly as we sort of started to roll out SLAs, I've seen the benefit of SLAs. I've seen how that's really enabled us to work very closely in partnership with those organisations to really deliver what our residents and what the community want, but also to really make sure that, again, as a local authority, given the sums of money involved, that again we are accountable, they are accountable, and we're all very clear right from the start on what all people involved in this, both the council and the voluntary organisations, what is expected from everyone. And as I say, I've seen real positives coming from this. I know a lot of my colleagues have. And at a time where funding, and there's no doubt about this, Councillor Hall touched on it earlier, funding is in numerous ways challenged. We spend a substantial amount of our Waverley budget on grants to the voluntary sector, And it's very, very important that we do all we can to protect that funding, to allow us to really support this area and this funding within Waverley. And that's something as an executive and as an administration we have been very keen to do. We've worked very closely with a lot of our officers on, so thank you to them as well for the ongoing work in this area, because it's absolutely crucial that we make sure we do all we can to really continue to help and fund this voluntary sector. So I look forward to seeing this work as it rolls out, and I know Councillor Bolton and your sort of team that you've got around you will be keeping us all updated. And as I say, I thoroughly endorse the SLA organisations, because they do a wonderful job, and we're very lucky to have them. Colleagues, I think I've gone on too long, but I think it needed to be said. There are 5 recommendations under item 8, across pages 4 and 5. Are those agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Going on and moving through to item 9, which is a lease extension, flat 1, 4 Boys in Farnham. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Leader. There really isn't much to say beyond what's in the report. It's a flat. It's the lease has long since expired. The occupants wish to extend that lease by a further 90 years. There's no reason why the council legitimately could refuse that. There's a small, very small income coming into the council, which I'm sure Councillor Hall will be grateful for every penny he can get. But simply, I recommend it to the council.
Thank you. Colleagues, can we take that item, that recommendation? Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Item 10, which is outstanding debts, the write-off for decision. And that item, I think, is under an exempt paper. So please, can I just remind you of that? And, sorry, I'm corrected. It's not. I thought that was, yes, it is. Just the annex, sorry. So the actual item isn't, but the annex is. So if anyone wants to discuss the annex, we will need to go into exempt. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Leader. I mean, I should say, first of all, that obviously Waverley goes to great lengths to pursue any monies owed to it. And it's only as a very, very last resort that we write off debts. In this case, we have about 7,000. The person has absconded, and it's been outstanding since 2009, and we've been unable to trace. The second one is sadly due to mental illness, and the person has had to go into a nursing home, and therefore both debts have been considered uncollectible. So in this case, I ask you to support that we write the debts off in accordance with normal process.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. There is one recommendation under that item. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 11, Interim Managing Director's decisions. Mr Horwood.
So, Leader, there are no particular urgent decisions that require reporting to this meeting.
Thank you. And there are no other items under the exempt. So on that note, I thank you all for your attendance, and we'll close the meeting. Thank you.